back to Cage Chat. It's been a little while since we've done a video, hasn't it? But I thought we'd do a preview for Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till. Now, before we get into it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and, of course, drop the video a like. Now, UFC Fight Island has been a blast, and we're coming towards the end of it as far as we know with the final event, which is Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till. Now, this is a middleweight bout which gets the mouth watering in a sense. Darren Till is coming in for his second middleweight bout after beating Calvin Gastelum at UFC 244, of course, whilst Robert Whittaker is coming back, bouncing back off of that loss of the title to Israel Adesanya, of course. Now this is the perfect main event. This was obviously meant to be at UFC Dublin, but with current circumstances, this has had to be moved to Fight Island. Now, personally, I've absolutely loved Fight Island, the events that they've put on, how smoothly they've gone as well. They've been phenomenal with what they've done. It shows why the UFC is the number one organisation in the world for MMA. But for this fight, it's incredible, and we've got an incredibly stacked card as well. Gustafsson's coming back for his heavyweight debut, of course, after retiring last year. He's back in the mix against the Fabricio Verdum, and we've also got a little bit of a nostalgic fight in terms of Shogun Rua versus Nogueira 3. And of course, we've got former strawweight champion Carla Esparza coming up against Marina Rodriguez. We've also got Khamzat Chimaev coming back 2 weeks after his impressive win on the Davison Figueiredo card, or the midweek card, sorry. But yeah, we've had 2 weeks, four fight cards in 2 weeks. It does get a bit muddled up sometimes. But yes, this is a stacked card. Tom Aspinall from the UK is stepping in, Mike Grundy. The UK lot have had a fantastic outgoing and showing. You know, Leroy Murphy picking up a good win. It's been phenomenal, and Jack Shaw, of course, making his UFC debut on that Wednesday card, of course, picking up another win. But no, let's get into the main event and a possible title decider. Now, yes, as I said, Whittaker is coming into this on the back of the loss to Israel Adesanya, the middleweight champion. But we know what Whittaker can bring. He's still only 29 years old. He's still very young in this game, despite having back-to-back wars with the old Romero, who's really taken some miles out of Robert Whittaker. You know, those bouts, they are wars. There's nothing to be said to it. But, you know, similarly, Darren Till, you know, former welterweight coming up to middleweight for his second bout. He looked very impressive at UFC 244 up against Calvin Gastelum, of course, after what was a bit of a rocky patch in his career. Again, only 27 years old. Again, he's still very much a young prospect coming into this game. And it seems to be the mentality in which he's really, really improved and progressed rather than his style and his fight IQ. Because he's always been very good with that, with his Muay Thai background, of course. You know, he's got fantastic striking, and you know, he's a phenomenal fighter, and he's coming into this, as I said, 27 years of age. He's gone into that title shot as well, and that for me, that is the dream fight for me. Adesanya versus Till. As you probably know, I'm a huge fan of Adesanya. I'm a huge fan of Darren Till, especially after how he's dealt with the lockdown, and his social media antics have been first class, really. Especially with Robert Whittaker as well. Even though them two have had back and forth. Now, for me, both fighters here, the biggest question is their mentality coming into this. We know what Robert Whittaker can do. We know what Darren Till can do. He showed it in the welterweight division up until he got that title fight against Tyron Woodley, which he has admitted almost came too soon for him. And of course, he came back with that against the Jorge Masvidal loss, unfortunately, in London, of course. And that really set in stone his move to the middleweight division. He's got a better weight cut, you know, those extra £10 or £15, let's say. And he looks phenomenal. He looks huge for that division. And I can see probably maybe 3-4 years from now we see him in the light heavyweight division. He's still huge for 185. So I can't see why we wouldn't see him in that light heavyweight division later on in his career, in his mid-30s perhaps, if he's still in the game, which I expect he still would be. Now, similarly, they're both the same height, which, you know, it's kind of confusing when when we pictured him at the face-offs yesterday. You finally realise how big Robert Whittaker is, because we've seen how big Darren Till is up against some welterweights, but seeing the size almost comparison for the first time against Whittaker, it did bring something to it. Now, I do think this is going to be more of a kickboxing bout. I don't see it's going to the ground too much. You know, both of them are very good on their feet. Both are very good on the ground, but their best work's done on their feet, of course. Now Whittaker comes into this landing 4.82 strikes per minute, whereas Darren Till is only on 2.4, and I say only, he's more of the point striker at times. You know, that fight against Kelvin Gastelum was more about him getting the win rather than getting the finish, and sometimes in your career you need to do that, because had he lost to Kelvin Gastelum, that would have been 3 on the balance, 1 in the middleweight division, he would have been in a really sticky position. But he is the number 1 fighter in the UK probably at the moment. He's probably our best bet for the next champion, of course, with Bisping being the only champion from the UK in MMA and in the UFC. But touching on that would, I wish Bisping was, say, 7 to 10 years younger, because I would have loved to see a rivalry between Bisping and Till, that Manchester and Liverpool connection, that rivalry that we have in football. I would have loved to have seen that in the MMA world and in the octagon. I think Bisping versus Till would have been absolute fireworks, but unfortunately we didn't get that. Similarly, how we didn't get to Whittaker and Bisping, of course. Bisping at the time was the undisputed champion. He took some time out, and obviously Whittaker became the champion, the interim champion. And we saw the altercations in the octagon when Bisping said, "Oh, I'll just have the real title. And I'll come back and get you for it later on down the line." But of course, GSP stepped in, took the belt, and of course retired, setting back to the middleweight division by about a year or two. And unfortunately, Whittaker, he didn't get the props he deserves, because obviously he was promoted to champion. He never fought for the undisputed belt, so to say. And then he fought Yoel Romero, who missed weight. So he's not got any sort of he hasn't got an official title defense to his name, but he's a middleweight champion in his own right. And of course, he's come out and said that the pressure of being champion has almost got too much for him. He didn't enjoy it, you know. And we've seen it with the likes of Rose Namajunas. It takes a mental toll on them. The added pressure of doing media work, you know. As a contender, you're always the one gunning for your next opponent, whereas as a champion, you've now got the X on your back, so to speak, and everyone's coming for you. But no, Whittaker seems very motivated right now. He seems happy, and that's what we want to see. Robert Whittaker's a nice guy, and he's an absolute monster in the cage. Of course, he was a former welterweight himself, so he probably knows what Till's been through in terms of moving up a weight class. But again, we need to preserve this fight between Adesanya and Till as much as possible. Till has said he's willing to step in should he win Saturday night at UFC 253, where Paulo Costa is supposed to challenge for the title. But if something happens in that fight, you know, Paulo Costa had supposed to be fighting Adesanya at UFC 248 until he tore his bicep. I believe he had bicep surgery, so that put him out. So who knows? Maybe Till could step in on short notice. Should Whittaker win, I can imagine you start to build up that rematch, because he did lose. He didn't look great, but again, it's more of the mental thing rather than his skill set just wasn't good enough. He wasn't there on the night. So it would be interesting to see what he could do against Adesanya, motivated and hungry and coming in as a challenger rather than the champion. But saying that, whether this is a bit biased, I do think Adesanya could be the champion for a little while. There's something special about the style bender, and maybe it does take someone like Till, who's quite bigger. I think he's bigger probably than Adesanya. He's maybe not as tall, but he's a lot thicker. Adesanya's quite lean for that division, should we say. Now moving on, we're going to skip the co-main event now. We're going to go to Alexander Gustafsson, who is making his heavyweight debut. Obviously, he retired after his loss against Anthony Smith last year in June, and he's come out and said that he did do that on emotions. Of course, it wasn't in Stockholm, in his hometown, or in his home nation, that he lost. You know, we see him taking off the gloves, leaving him in the cage, and saying it's all over. But as a fighter, as you know, it's never really over, is it? You still always have that bug once you get back into training, once you get back into the swing of things. And even once you retire, you see yourself losing your discipline. And that probably is the main factor as to why they come back, as why fighters come back and make their return. We see it so often. A fighter says they're retired, and then a year later down the line they come back and step inside the octagon. Probably how Henry Cejudo is. Henry Cejudo announced his retirement, but it's still going to Alexander Volkanovski, of course, in the featherweight division. He wants another crack at becoming a free division champion. Now, he has lost 2 of his last 3 fights, of course, that being against John Jones in the rematch. He hasn't looked great in his last 2 fights. Now there was rumours, I don't know if they've been confirmed, about his back injury or a potential back injury that he had. Now whether he's just had some time to heal up, have some good time away from the sport. Because he's not that old. He just got a lot of miles on the clock. Ever seen him? He's had wars with John Jones in that first fight in DC, of course, in the light heavyweight division. So he's had some back and forth, and he's always been on the cusp of being champion. But when he got such a dominant champion in John Jones, you've seen it. OSP's moved up. DC moved up. It must be so demotivating to see John Jones being at the top for so long. And you're looking at that heavyweight division going, oh, maybe I have the chance up here. Now he's coming at 240, which is a good weight for him. It's probably a good almost decider as to see how we see Jones move up. Because I think OSP came in at 230, 240 as well. Now he is fighting a former champion in the Brizio the Doom. He did come back from suspension at UFC 249 and lost a decision against, of course, Alexei Golenik, who seems to be pulling off the miracles with the age that he is. But the Doom, of course, it was his first fight back. He didn't look too bad, considering he had a 2-year layoff, of course. But it's going to be interesting, though. Of course, we know his potential on the ground, but I think Gustafsson probably edges it in the striking just a little bit. And stylistically, I think Gustafsson could be a bad matchup for the Doom, but should the Doom land that punch and get him to the ground, it would be night-night, I think, pretty quickly for Gustafsson. So this is a really tough one to decide. Let's have a look at the tail of the tape, of course. As I said, the Doom's got a lot of miles on that clock. You've got that 1-inch reach advantage in the height. The Gustafsson, they're coming at similar weight, but of course the reach advantage for both his arms and his leg reach does benefit Gustafsson in this bout. But to move to the co-main, we've got a light heavyweight fight, which of course is probably more the nostalgic fight really. These two have fought twice before already, with Shogun getting the wins on both occasions. But I must admit that was before either my days watching the UFC and watching MMA. Once in Pride in 2005 and of course in 2015. And this seems to be almost maybe a goodbye fight for one of these fighters, if not both. Nogueira is, of course, 44 years old, while Shogun is 38. Shogun's last fight was a draw, of course, to Paul Craig in November 2019, of course, and he's got 4 wins in his last 6 fights, with another loss coming to Anthony Smith. Now, Nogueira, he's lost four fights in his last 6. He's really come towards the end of that career, and what a career it's been, should I say. But his last fight was a first-round KO loss to Ryan Spann at UFC 237, of course. So this one is a tough one. I think I'm going to have to go with Shogun. He's going to do a 3-peat. He's going to be 3-0 up come Saturday night, and I think we see a retirement from Nogueira and potentially Shogun, because it's not... Well, actually, no. Shogun, like Glover Teixeira, could push maybe a late title challenge, perhaps, but Nogueira definitely is on that tailing out side of his career, and I do expect him to hang up the gloves inside the octagon, or at least announce his retirement come Sunday morning. Now we move on to a former strawweight champion in Carla Esparza, who does come in to face undefeated Marina Rodriguez. Now Rodriguez, unfortunately, she drew to a Cynthia Calvillo, who's now a flyweight contender, of course. She missed weight in that fight, and they did get a draw against each other. She's, as I said, undefeated, 12-0, 2 draws. You don't get many draws in MMA. It's pretty unfortunate for her career. But she is a Contender Series alumni. She's coming up against the Ultimate Fighter winner for the strawweight division, the original strawweight champion before she got dismantled by Yoni and Jacek, of course. But Carla Esparza, she's on a 3-fight win streak since her loss to Tatiana Suarez, who seems to be out. She's been out a long while with her neck injury, so I'm hoping we see her back or see some sign of her returning very soon. Her last fight was against Michelle Watson at UFC 249, where she did get a unanimous decision win, of course. But this one, I think, could be an almost passing of the guard, so to speak. We see Marina Rodriguez, she's undefeated, and I think she's going to come in and probably get a decision win. This could be a very good fight. I think the strawweight division is probably the tightest division that we've got in the women's roster, and this one could go the whole distance and be an absolute barn burner. But I think I'm gonna have to go with Marina for this one. and they're both ranked 7th and 9th respectively. I think this could be a push into that top 6 for Marina Rodriguez. But the only sort of question mark is that one of the cornermen did test positive for COVID-19, so it depends. I haven't seen how far ago or how long ago that was. This fight was meant to be on the card last week, but got pushed back for obvious reasons. So it'd be interesting to see how that affects Marina Rodriguez, whether that cornerman is now allowed to travel with her, and depending on who the cornerman is, how detrimental that is to her training camp and how she's been able to train in the build up to this fight. But I do think she's going to get the win, and I think she'll be fine going into fight night. So yes, those are the fights we're going to be looking to. Those are the fights we've looked to, of course. And I'm buzzing for this weekend's card. I'm buzzing for that main event. It's arguably the best main event we've had, other than maybe Masvidal and Usman. Of course, that one's a special one in itself. But I think Whittaker and Till, this has something special for it. It's hard to say whether it's going to go 5 rounds or not. I think it will, but I think if it does, it's going to be an absolute war. I don't think it's been a 4-1 or a 5-0 in terms of the scorecards. I think it's going to be a 2-2 going into the 5th round perhaps. But I do think Darren Till, if I'm going through a finish, I'm going to go with a Darren Till 3rd round finish, maybe a 2nd, 3rd round finish. But I just hope he doesn't go in there. He's looked very calm in the build up to this week, and I'm hoping, one, that's not a sign that he's almost not ready in terms of, we saw him against Calvin Gastelum post-fight, very, he came out and said he almost wanted to feign an injury and say he couldn't go up there. But I think we'll see the best of Darren Till, and I'm hoping we'll see a maturity in Darren Till, because I think we've seen a maturity in him mentally, and I think he's changing his game plan up ever so slightly. The way he thought Stephen Thompson and the way he thought Calvin Gastelum was very smart. But I don't want to say the hype got a bit too much for him, but he definitely got pushed up a little bit too quickly against Tyron Woodley, and of course Jorge Masvidal was almost a shock result. He was supposed to beat Jorge Masvidal and settle that fight with Ben Askren, of course, but unfortunately it didn't go that way. But I think we're going to see the best of Darren Till, and as I said, he's only 27 years of age. But this card is incredible as well. It's got 15 fights on it. It's a UFC equaling record, or UFC record equaling amount of fights, should I say. And as I said, we've got Khamzat Chimaev against a debut in Reece McKee. The Cage Warriors guys have really shown up this past 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of the Cage Warriors guys. My only sort of downside to this sort of 2 week period that we've had is the fact that we've not seen Leon Edwards. I would have loved to have seen Leon Edwards. We know, repping the UK, we've seen Molly McCann, unfortunately not get the results she wanted. But the amount of talent from the European circuit especially has truly been on display this weekend and these past 2 weeks. Past 2 weeks. But yes, make sure to leave your predictions down in the comment. Who do you think is going to win, Darren Till or Robert Whittaker? Do we see Darren Till versus Adesanya maybe towards the end of the year, or maybe Till versus Costa perhaps? Who do you think is going to win that title fight, and who do you think is really going to be Till's next opponent should he win? But yes, make sure to, as I said, leave the predictions down below for the rest of the fights. Fight of the night bonuses, performance of the night bonuses, leave the predictions to that as well. Make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.